second Amulet ain't bad at all. Now a bounce land is basically just game. I will go ahead and play that. So far, our opponent has said to us that they do not have it, so pass back. They suspended a Lotus Bloom as well, which probably does not matter. They're either going to win before we get to a Titan, or we're going to win before they get to their combo. Hello and welcome, guys. Today we are here with a fresh new league, and today is a very exciting day because not only have I received my Urza Sagas in paper here, as you see in the photo in front of you, but also just yesterday, I got a 5-0 with a Reclaimer list that played 0 Flagstones or Trocaire, something I've been trying to achieve for a while. I'd been doing well with these Flagstone list Reclaimer lists, 4-1s all over the place, never could get the 5-0, finally managed to snipe that 5-0, and today we are going to be playing a list very similar to what you see on the screen here. The only thing different to note about the list that I'm putting on screen now is that in this list, we are playing a mainboard Radiant Fountain over one of the untapped green sources, as the difference between 13 and 12 is quite small, and instead of this fountain in the sideboard, we're playing a 4th Arboreal Grazer for those aggressive matchups. So that's going to be the only real change here. That said, we still have plenty to talk about this deck list, of what's going on, and why we've made this shift to Elvish Reclaimer, why I think it's good, and also some of the reasoning behind some of the choices in the deck list. So, first of all, obviously the card Elvish Reclaimer, if you're not familiar, it's a 1-mana 1/2 that gets +2/+2 as long as there are 3 or more lands in your graveyard, usually not relevant. The second ability is the more relevant part, which is 2 and tap and sacrifice a land, search your library for a land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. So, play Reclaimer on turn 1, turn 2, play an untapped source, you can immediately activate Reclaimer and set up, for example, an Urza Saga. Or you can cycle into a Cavern of Souls. Or even if you have nothing else to search for, you can just upgrade a forest into a breeding pool. Or get a Castle Garenbrig online to get a slightly faster Titan. Things along those lines. That is the idea of Reclaimer for this build, is marginal and incremental advantages rather than actually ramping us. As you may know, the card Reclaimer is typically played with Flagstones of Trocaire, the legendary land that replaces itself with a Plains card whenever it dies. And obviously the idea with that is you use the Flagstones to pay for the cost of Elvish Reclaimer, you sacrifice the Flagstones, and you search for a land from the Flagstones, and then you still get to search from the Reclaimer, thus going up a land overall. This is a pretty decent plan, in my opinion. However, I oftentimes found that the decks playing Flagstones, and obviously several copies of something like Temple Garden, some sort of plains to search for with Flagstones, they could often be clunky. There's not enough room, really, in the deck list to play 4 copies of Flagstones and 3 or 4 Temple Gardens. Usually, the maximum you can play is 3 Flagstones. And that said, I found myself too often trying to Reclaimer a Flagstones into play and then untap and Reclaimer the Flagstones away for something else, rather than just going straight away and getting the thing that I wanted. And not to mention that Reclaimer now is capable of searching for a land that is a direct threat to our opponent. For example, in control mirrors or in mid-range matchups, as soon as you untap with a Reclaimer, you're guaranteed to get access to 1 Urza Saga at least. That'll be good for a couple constructs. It'll let you get an Amulet into play if you're against a fast matchup. And obviously you can use bounce lands and stuff to reset your Saga, or just sacrifice the Saga in response to the 3rd trigger to the Reclaimer again to go get another Saga or just something else. Things along those lines. So Reclaimer is actually surprisingly good at grinding, even without having necessarily gone up a mana. The only way that Reclaimer in this list is going to end up producing mana for your Titan turn is by searching for a Castle Garenbrig preemptively, so that your Titan effectively only costs 4 to cast, rather than the 6 that it would usually, since 4 plus the Garenbrig will make your Titan come down basically a turn earlier, generally. But also, Reclaimer, if you have 1 Amulet in play, and say you sacrifice a Saga to search up a 2nd Amulet, then you can pay 2 mana, sacrifice a land, and get a bounce land. And, of course, with double Amulet in play, you get to untap it twice, and that allows you to float 4 total mana, so it takes 2 mana and turns it into 4 mana, ramping twice, actually, on the turn that you're trying to cast Primeval Titan. It's especially good at enabling something like Talaria West, if you need to transmute before you cast a Titan, so Reclaimer does have utility outside of just finding some interesting lands. And, of course, there are matchups where Reclaimer, especially in this list with no Flagstones, is going to really be a detriment, and will sideboard out Reclaimers in those matchups. Things like Burn, for example. Burn and Prowess, where Reclaimer is likely to just die on the spot to our opponent's spot removal spells, and we don't really have the time to be messing around trying to set up lands. We just need to try to get to Titan on turn 3, and that's the whole game. Well, if that's the kind of matchup you're playing, then Reclaimer is not really going to be where you want to be in those matchups. And for that, we have 2 copies of Grazer in the sideboard, along with the 2 in the main board, to side in and kind of refill our 1-drop slot when we're going to be siding out Reclaimers in those types of matchups. So that's the card, and why it's good with the Saga list in particular, and even why it's good without Flagstones. But there's also a few interesting things that I've chosen to do here. The main board should look pretty normal to you if you've seen any Amulet main boards. The only thing that's really missing here is possibly a copy of Azusa, Lost But Seeking. But recently I decided to cut that Azusa because I found myself oftentimes packing for an Arboreal Grazer in those situations anyways, just so that I could guarantee that my Titan's going to come down and I'm not going to get my Azusa bolted before I can get the extra mana out of it that I need. For example, I very seldom find myself enjoying having an Azusa, although maybe we'll see if we ever get a situation where Azusa would have been good with Tireless Tracker from the board. It is possible, but just in general, I haven't really been super impressed by Azusa, so we did shave the 1 copy. And, like I said before, we are playing a ton of untapped green sources for turn 1. In this particular case, we're playing 12. The average Amulet list plays at maximum 8. I've always liked to play at least 9, and for this particular case, I wanted to max out on being able to play turn 1 Reclaimer or turn 1 Grazer, regardless of whatever matchup we're playing against. We are now somewhere around 80, I think it's 84. Let me look it up. Okay, so I've done the calculation real quick using StatTrek's Hypergeometric Calculator. If we have a deck size of 60 cards, and there are 12 untapped green sources in those 60 cards, and we're drawing a sample size of 7 cards, our opening hand, we would like to see 1 untapped green source in those 7 cards, and the likelihood of that happening, of seeing at least 1 or more, is 81 basically, % chance. So we are 81% likely to hit that basic land in our opening hand, and of course that is going to be a higher number for if you consider an additional mulligan, for example, mulliganing down to 6 and having a green source in that hand. If we consider that to be a success as well, then it goes even higher, more upward towards the 90s, the high 90s, but regardless, we are extremely likely to be able to cast our 1-drops on turn 1 if we draw them, regardless of whether they require the colorless mana or the green mana, and that's kind of the idea. Here we are playing a couple of extra cards that perhaps Amulet doesn't usually play anymore. We've got 1 copy of Yavimaya, Cradle of Growth, just a generally good land. It's basically Urborg, but for green. It makes all lands forests in addition to their other types, including your opponents. And then we have 2 copies of Turn Timber Symbiosis, just an extra land source that isn't always necessarily a land, so theoretically we're playing 36 lands, plus these 2 would be 38, but in reality we're actually only playing 36 lands, and we have some Turn Timber Symbiosis to top deck and potentially convert into a Titan or a Dryad or something along those lines, so we are playing those in addition to the fetch lands, forests, other untapped sources, the Crumbling Vestige, the Cavern, Breeding Pool, those kinds of things. So everything else is, like I would say, very standard. We do have 1 mainboard Bog to go along with our Reclaimer, as, of course, Reclaimer being able to search for Bog is going to be extremely potent in the Dredge matchup, the Storm matchup, and also in the Living In matchup. Those are a couple places where Reclaimer really shines and helps you flip-flop a matchup that would otherwise be horrendous, except in the case of Dredge, which is usually a good matchup anyways. Reclaimer will let you flip-flop your Storm and Living In matchups just completely wide open. You search for Bojuka Bog, and basically the game is ended on the spot. So, anyways, we do want that one in the main for that effect, but otherwise we have a Ghost Quarter in the sideboard as well, against Tron opponents, Amulet opponents, that kind of thing. And mainly it's the type of effect you want to side in the current meta. And yeah, everything else is pretty standard, so I don't want to go over a whole lot more here, as we've already taken long enough in this intro, so I will see you guys in match 1 here. While we are waiting for an opponent here, I just want to mention that I recently hit 300 subscribers and put out a PowerPoint about how to sideboard with Amulet Titan, and if you haven't seen that before, then go check it out. I'll leave a link in the description below. But the reason I'm mentioning this is because the next milestone is at 500 subs. I will be putting out a PowerPoint video at 500 subs. I'm not entirely sure what the topic of that video will be just yet. I've received a suggestion to make it about Karn Amulet in particular, or I might lump Karn and Reclaimer Amulet together, do a specialty video on those decks and the differences in those strategies and how those strategies are different than just playing a traditional quote-unquote Amulet list. But if you have other ideas or something that you'd like to see, leave it in the comments below. And of course, if you'd like to see that video happen or support the channel in general, then go ahead and leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Once we hit 500 subs, I will be putting that video out for you guys. So go ahead and show your support. Alrighty, let's hop in here for the match. See if we get a turn 1 Reclaimer kind of hand on the draw. Playing against Salami. We got a turn 1 Amulet kind of hand. We're on the draw as well, which means that we do have a shot at having a turn 2 3-drop here. We could spike a Dryad off the top in the next 2 draws. It's not really the strongest. If we do top deck a Reclaimer, it's not too bad either. This hand's a little slow. But I mean, it has the Amulet, it has the Titan. I suppose if we draw a Garenbrig, then that makes this a turn 4 Titan. Even if we don't draw a ramp spell. So we could draw a Garenbrig, we could draw a Dryad. We could draw a Reclaimer just to have something to do. We have a natural Cavern of Souls. If we're playing against like a quicker matchup like Burn, for example, this hand is not going to be fantastic. Discard spells could be problematic for this hand too, as we would need to find another Titan, like a Summoner's Pact or Titan. But I think I'm willing to try it. So it's a little suspect, but I mean, we got turn on Amulet. How can you turn that down? Playing against Seachrome Coast. Serum Visions. Sorry about that. The automated light went out, and I had to go put it on hold. My apologies. I am usually pretty good about remembering not to leave it on a timed setting, but alas, here we are with a turn 1 Amulet draw against probably Ad Nauseam, I would say. So Yavimaya could actively detriment us if our opponent has Gemstone Mine in hand, and the Yavimaya lets them tap it for mana without having to remove a counter. So I'm pretty tempted to kind of save this Yavimaya until the last possible second. For that reason, it might be a bit of a phantom upside here, as it may never be relevant, but we also might just be playing against a Stoneblade deck of some sort, or some kind of Blue-Eyed Taxes build, although Serum Visions would be a little unusual for a Taxes build, so I wouldn't really bet that. You see Darkslick Shores. Yeah, this feels a lot like Ad Nauseam to me, or, yeah, Profane Tutor as well, so this is definitely going to be an Ad Nauseam deck. In which case, having the turn 1 Amulet, turn 2 double Amulet, is going to be pretty good. Here, I think we're supposed to play the Growth Chamber, leave it and play it, Transmute Telarios, and then have Titan next turn, and hope our opponent doesn't Angel's Grace us, I suppose. So we'll hit 5s to make sure there's no yields. Yeah, I guess I didn't consider drawing a second Amulet, but that is definitely something that this hand can do that would be conducive to casting an early Titan, so we'll get the Summoner's Pact here and pass it back. Our opponent's Profane Tutor is going to be coming off of Suspend next turn. Hopefully they'll just be dead by then. You suspend Lotus Bloom. Tap the Seachrome. There we go. Nice. Alright, now don't play a white-producing land. I guess we could still run face first into a Pact of Negation, but there's not much we can do to play around that. So I'm probably not going to be playing around that, I would say. I think I would probably force our opponent to have the Angel's Grace to save themselves from Xaxes with the Titan here as well. Because if we get our Titan into play and search for Boros Garrison Slayer Stronghold, we can activate it twice to, Thoughtseize. Well, luckily we still have a Titan anyways. The Summoner's Pact isn't just a ramp spell, it's also actually just a Primeval Titan, so that's nice. I wouldn't be surprised to see our opponent concede here. But regardless, if we get a Titan into play, we can double activate Slayer Stronghold on it to give it +2/+0 for each activation, so a total of +4/+0, which is putting our Titan up to a 10 power attacker, and then we attack and get Sunhome and Vesuva copying the Boros Garrison to give it double strike, and of course that'll take our 10 damage and make it into 20 damage, which will obviously be enough to kill our opponent here, so they need to have an untapped white source and an Angel's Grace, and then still be able to combo us, which is certainly possible. There's a Titan. So yeah, I guess we're just playing the Growth Chamber and going in, huh? We don't even have to Summoner's Pact. Alright, we can actually attack with 2 Titans here. Since we have a Summoner's Pact, we don't actually have to double haste the same Titan. We can get in for even a little bit more damage by getting a second Titan into play here before we search for the Boros Garrison, so might as well do that, I suppose. Our opponent didn't Pact of Negation. I suppose if they had Pact of Negation but just didn't want to cast it, then going for the second Summoner's Pact would potentially expose us to lethal, but if they had it and could cast it, they would probably have used it on this Titan, so it doesn't really matter. It's lethal anyways. Whatever. I'm just gonna kill them. There's no reason to mess around and try to get another Titan into play here. Plus, if something horrendously backfires in some abnormal way, then at least we won't have to pay for a Summoner's Pact, so we'll activate for 1 here, and then we'll activate for the second time. All according to plan. Pick up the Stronghold. Go to combat, attack. Yep. We'll get the Sunhome and the Vesuva. We'll copy the Boros Garrison, and that will be the game. Just need to stack these Sunhomes on the bottom. There they go. Yeah, so looks like we're going to game 2 here. We'll just pick up the Sunhome. Don't see why not. And our opponent's dead. Okay. So against Ad Nauseam, we obviously want Pact of Negation. Force of Vigor and Foundation Breaker can hit things like Pentad Prism, and I guess possibly Lotus Bloom, although they'll probably just use it immediately if they can. But it could theoretically hit Lotus Bloom as well. I suppose Explosives on 0 would be good against specifically Lotus Bloom, but I don't know. I'm not convinced that Explosives is great here. I guess it also hits Phyrexian Unlife, but I don't know. That said, Foundation Breaker and Force hit both the Pentad Prisms and Phyrexian Unlives of the world, so I'm pretty happy with just these 3. Against Ad Nauseam, I don't think we care too much for Reclaimer. Like, the best thing that it does is get a Cavern of Souls online so we can play around our opponent's possible Pact of Negation of their own, but I'm not really inclined to think that's going to be super relevant here, so I think we just trim the Reclaimers and bring in some Grazers instead for speed. And then finally, the Vajuka Bog doesn't matter even in the slightest. The Radiant Fountain is probably irrelevant, but it's an untapped source for Amulet or playing a Dryad onto or something like that. I kind of think that we can just trim a Turn Timber. We have 4 Pacts and 4 Titans. Turn Timber is not really helping us that much here. We don't need extra redundant threats, we just need 1 threat to resolve. Alright, and here we have a turn 1 Amulet hand. We have Foundation Breaker to interact, but we don't have an actual green source, which is kind of problematic. That said, we can force pitching a Summoner's Pact to hit like a Pentad Prism or a Phyrexian Unlife, so I think it's a keep. Not the strongest. We'd like to see a bounce land off the top, but other than that, like, it's fine. They thought sees us, okay. They probably take the Amulet here, in which case, his hand is less fine. We can Vesuva copying their City of Brass to get our colored mana. I do assume they have to take the Amulet here. Yep. Alright. Draw for turn. Fetch land. Interesting. Well, now we can just Vesuva Breeding Pool, so I'm inclined to play the fetch out here and pass. We'll yield until the end step. See if they're playing... Oh, they're suspending Profane Tutor. Yeah, this is a good one. I didn't point it out in the first game, like, what it does, but it's basically a suspend card that lets you search your library for a card, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. So, like, Demonic Tutor, but you have to wait a couple turns for it to, I guess, come off suspend. It's a pretty good card, I think. Alright, let's see what we top deck here. Grazer. Yeah, I mean, I guess we might as well play it. We'll yield here, and we'll Vesuva copy in the Breeding Pool, and then we'll play... We'll not pay the life. We'll play the Cavern Naming Giant here in the hopes that we'll be able to get to Titan mana eventually, and be able to play around an opponent having Pact of Negation, so... Looks like we're going to be a little too slow this game. Even if we had kept, or been able to keep the Amulet, if our opponent didn't have the turn 1 Thoughtseize, I think that we still would have been in a little bit of trouble here. Alright, what can we find off the top? Bounce land, perhaps? Amulet. That's not too bad. That's not too bad. We'll play it. And, yeah, we'll just pass. No reason to attack with a Grazer for the meme value. Our opponent gets to search for a card here with their Profane Tutor. See what they find. I assume that they're going to just Thassa's Oracle and Spoils of the Vault and Angel's Grace combo us here. It would be very easy for them to have land and then all of those things, so... And in fact, they only need land, Angel's Grace, Spoils, and then they can draw the Thassa's Oracle from their deck, so... No, they're just passing. Okay, so there's a chance. We'll draw. Second amulet ain't bad at all. Now a bounce land is basically just game. I will go ahead and play that. So far, our opponent has said to us that they do not have it, so we'll pass back. They suspended a Lotus Bloom as well, which probably does not matter. They're either going to win before we get to a Titan, or we're going to win before they get to their combo. All right, we'll untap here. Draw. All right. Land is not terrible. No reason to hardcast Foundation Breaker here. Sorry, I had to sneeze. Now, any land off the top lets us Titan, and it can't be Pact of Negation since we do have Cavern Naming Giant, so I got not any land. It would have to be an ETB tap land or a Garen Brig or a bounce land, but regardless, there's many things that do it here, so we'll see what we can find off the top. Of course, the third Summoner's Pact. Not really helping us out that much here, but yeah, I guess now our opponent will get to Lotus Bloom. Well, I guess we're dying to their combo. I have to assume that they just need the mana. I guess they have Ad Nauseam. I don't know. If they Angel's Grace Ad Nauseam us here, then we probably still lose. I don't know how they would be able to play the Oracle, though. Angel's Grace, okay. Oh, no, they do have exactly enough mana for Oracle. Okay, so yeah, we're basically just dead here. We'll see how this works, though. Might as well. There's the Ad Nauseam. So this is a 5-mana instant that says, reveal the top card of your library and put that card into your hand. You lose life equal to its mana value. You may repeat this process any number of times. And of course, because Angel's Grace says that they can't die this turn, even if they go to a negative life total, they're still not actually dead here. So they just draw their whole deck here with Ad Nauseam here, paying all the life that they want to, going to into the far negatives. And at least we get to see their whole deck here. And what they're going to do here is in our second main phase, they're going to cast this, or not in our second main phase. After this Ad Nauseam has drawn their whole deck, they're going to cast this Thassa's Oracle, which basically lets them win on the spot because they'll have fewer than X cards in their library. So we are dead here. Might as well take a look at what they have. They have Slaughter's Pact. Interesting. They do have Phyrexian Unlife, as we expected. Pentad Prism. I saw a Second Thoughtseize. Yeah, it looks like it's just the one Slaughter Pact. That's interesting here. I don't even see Pact of... No, they do have Pact of Negation. Interesting. Alright, well, we lose. Perfectly understandable. We were just one land away. Alright, well, I guess we're gonna go to Game 3 here. At least we get to be on the play this time, which is quite relevant. I don't think Ghost Quarter is particularly good. I guess I should have checked to see if they had basic lands, but they probably have basic island. Most Ad Nauseam lists do, so probably not super interested in Ghost Quarter either here. Don't think Explosives is really going to help us that much. They can't even win at instant speed, like, in their upkeep. Like, they put Lotus into play and we pop Explosives and they just crack it, cast Angel's Grace and Ad Nauseam at instant speed in response to Explosives, and then it doesn't really do anything, so I don't think we really want that one. I don't think we want any of these, to be honest. I think we'd rather just hit submit, so that's what I'm going to do. I was thinking about potentially cutting this Turn Timber, but I think that just having an untapped source is better than any of the cards we had in our sideboard, so we'll play first here. Man, we're just on all the double Amulet draws today. I definitely won't complain. We're snap keeping this as well. Hopefully our opponent doesn't turn 1 Thoughtseize us, as we do have the turn 2 Titan, so we'll go ahead and play out this Amulet, and we'll pass it back. And of course, next turn we have Titan by playing Amulet, playing a bounce land, floating 4 mana, and then picking up the forest, and then grazering out the second bounce land, going down to 3, but then back up to 7 in the process. Summoner's Pacting for Titan, and casting said Titan, so our opponent doesn't even have the white to save themselves with Angel's Grace, so this is basically just deterministic at this point. I guess they could have the one of Slaughter Pact, but then they still die to it, so yeah, these are the kinds of draws that you need to beat Ad Nauseam. I mean, they are a little slower than other combo decks, so it would not be crazy to have a couple turns against Ad Nauseam. I always found this matchup to be quite 50-50, personally. Alright, we'll Summoners Pact. We'll get a Primeval Titan. We'll pick up the Gruul Turf because we like blue mana. Might as well leave a red floating, I guess. We could put a second Titan into play. I guess that kind of plays around... It doesn't actually play around Slaughter Pact plus anything crazy. I guess they could have the Black Fog effect. I'm wondering if there's a way we can actually play around that. So we get Selesnya Sanctuary, Slayer's Stronghold, activate once, pick it up. I don't think our opponent could actually beat that. And then if they have the Black Fog card, I forget what it's called, Darkness, I believe it is, then we still actually just win the game here. Next turn, obviously. Interesting. We could even still double strike there. We'd only be getting through for 16 points of damage. Or we could just go for lethal. I think there's a very strong likelihood we'll just win next turn anyways, especially with a backup Titan, so I think I'm inclined to play around Darkness just because we can. I don't see a reason not to, if I'm being completely honest. Alright, we'll untap. And untap again. Our opponent concedes anyways. Alright, well, that was a pretty interesting match against Ad Nauseam. We just drew all the double amulet draws, which, like I said, in this particular matchup, that's a very good thing for us. And, yeah, we didn't get to see much of Reclaimer in action, but that will be coming in a later match, I assure you. And thank you guys for joining me for this one. Let me know what you think about the deck list, and let me know your suggestions for that 500 subs video, which hopefully will be coming sooner than intended. And I will see you guys for the next match. This is Red Face Menace, signing off.